My name is George Massie, and I'm out here this afternoon to tell you something about gold panning. I've been mining for about 25 years, and the gold pan is the most universal tool that any prospector and miner will use. There's been a lot of gold pans manufactured and a lot of confusion on how to use them, and you see practically every miner has his own style, and anything that works is okay, but there are some basics that everybody should know. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you some of the basics and tell you about some of the different kind of gold pans, and then I'm going to introduce you to some real expert panners, some guys that really know their stuff when it comes to panning. Some guys like Perry Massie, our mining engineer, Blueberry John with his Blueberry Bounce, Jake Hartwick, a fellow that's been working concentrates for a long time. And I'm going to try to dispel some of the confusion and talk to you about the different ways that the gold pan is used. This particular pan that I have here I like extremely well because it has a nice flat bottom. It has the old Chinese traps in it. Now, let me tell you something about the Chinese. At one time we used to use the metal pan. The metal pans were shaped much like our copper pans are, but the Chinese got the idea that if they dropped their pan and they dented it, they would create a kind of a trap in their pan. And so they started using hammers to actually hammer in a trap in their gold pan, and that's why the new pans with plastic that we've made, they come out real easy, that they've put these traps in. And actually they were developed by the Chinese in California in the 1850s. They were real good little miners. They tunnel along the bedrock and do a lot of things. Now let's talk about how the gold pan is used. First of all, you use the gold pan for sampling in the stream. You can go along the stream bank and you can sample here and there, and you can find some color. We've talked in other lectures and programs that the GPAA has put out about where to go in a stream. But when you get to a likely spot that you think the gold pan is used, you can just you can go down, take your shovel and take a sample of material and sample it out, and that way you can tell whether there's any gold there. Some of the other uses for a gold pan. If you work your concentrates down, for instance, if you get down to where there's some black sand, just a minute and I'll show you. I'll give you a first little go through on the pan, and we're just working flow sand, so we're pretty certain that there's no gold in this, but there could be some black sand, and as you know, or have you been told before probably, that there could possibly be some gold in that black sand. Now I'm out in the swift water. You really would like to find a calmer place to pan, especially for the beginner. If you've been panning for quite a while, of course you can pan just about anywhere that there's water. But if you're just starting out, the best thing to do is to work in calmer water. Now, a lot of people will stop when they've got a lot of material in their pan. What you want to do is you want to get right down to the point to where you can see the gold. Let me take a couple of pans. I'll go through and demonstrate with you. We don't have much in this, but we've got some black sand and a few little tiny pieces of color. You dump that off into your bucket. That right there is what we call concentrates, because what we've done is we've taken the sand and we've concentrated it down to the heavies, and then we dump our concentrates in. So when you hear me talking about the word or the term concentrate while I'm going through panning, you'll know what I'm talking about. Now let's take some different pans here, and I'll show you which ones I like. One of the first gravity trap pans that came out was the Garrett pan, and of course it's endorsed by the Gold Prospectors Association. I like the Garrett pan real well. You take that pan, you put it down, you take the material and you throw it into your pan, and some of the things that you want to remember. If you can classify and get the larger rocks out when you're sampling, you will increase the recovery of your fine gold. But of course, if you don't have a classifier, use your hands to classify. Just go into your pan and pull out the larger rocks like that and throw them out. Make sure that you shake the pan real good, because what this will allow it to do, the gold is heavy and it will sink to the bottom. Now some of the experts that I have coming up are going to show you, they're going to explain about specific gravity and how that material is aerated. But the main thing that you want to remember is to keep the material that's in your pan semi-liquid. See how it's all liquid there, and that way the gold, which is heavy, can make its descent. It's all right to reach in your pan and knock a few of those rocks out. If you're dealing with real fine gold, basically when you're out here in the stream, you're going to be losing some anyway when you're just sampling. So when you're just sampling, you're looking for a good likely spot to put your sluice box or your dredge, or to do some additional panning. And if you get down to your concentrates, of course you'll want to do that in a real good area. Let's just let me just pan this down here. Now what I'm doing is I'm keeping this under the water. I'm using the traps. You can see that I'm working kind of corner to the current here, because really a guy should have a little quieter place. But let's just work that down. And as you can see, we're keeping a good liquid condition. We're not pouring the material. It's really important that you understand not to lift the pan up and pour, because when you pour the gold with it. So you want to keep a good semi-liquid condition. You want to practice that. And take this and allow that material just to roll right off there. Now it's okay to stop and pick those rocks out, and let's just pan this down and see. Now we've got a little bit of color in this pan here, and I'll do what we call a fanning action. There's going to be some guys come up in this program and they'll show you what a fanning action is all about. But let me show you here. You see the pieces of gold here? Now normally this is what you're going to find is fine gold. You're always going to need something called a sucker bottle. Now Blueberry John, Perry, some of these guys, Jake, they'll show you how to use these, but basically the sucker bottle is to suck that fine gold up when you find it. If you're working concentrates, working in an enclosed area with a tub. Let's take a look at some of the other kind of pans, and it's real interesting to talk about gold panning and what makes a good, they say a nervous person makes a better gold pan. That gold is the gold that's still in the ore. But what you can do, if you're a good panner, you can take a piece of material and you can crush it up and put it in your gold pan, and you can actually pan it out. And if there's any free milling gold, that's visible gold in there, you'll be able to see that right out of the rock. This right here is a trap pan. This is developed by a guy by the name of Eldon Rodman, and he's got a special way that he uses that pan, and I've got one here that I'll show you in a few minutes. This is a classifier. These are important because remember we talked about that if you can classify off the larger rocks, you'll have a higher recovery of gold. This particular thing right here will set right down on the bucket that I'm setting on. But right now I'm setting on the bucket, but I think you can visualize how that you can put this right on top of the bucket, shovel into it, and throw the larger rocks off. Let me just give you a demonstration. See, if we took this and we put let me get a gold pan here. We sunk the gold pan, and we take that and we classify it. See here how we can classify off all the large rocks, and we don't have to pick them off by hand. And that saves us a lot of time when we're able to do that. So a nice classifier is good to have, and you can make one of those classifiers, and those are all important to panning. Here's a pan that was developed by a fellow up in Washington. It's called a square pan, and there's a lot of guys that use the square pan. Now this takes the same kind of action that I was showing you on the round pan. I particularly like the round pan because I can get a swirling action, but you get the same kind of action. You notice here that we've got a good semi-liquid condition of the material in our pan. We can classify off some of the larger rocks, and we do not pull up and pour. We get a nice rocking action in this pan. It works almost like the old rocker box, and you can see that trails the material off. So any of these pans will work. It's just a matter of what you get used to. And of course, after you start mining, remember that every prospector and miner has his own idea as to what's best, and you will develop your own idea as to what's best as well. Let's take a look here now. We can see the gold that's in the riffle. See the gold in there? It's laying along here. There again, you need your sucker bottle. Let me get this so I don't fall over here on my stool. But you need your sucker bottle to suck that gold out of there again. So the sucker bottle is a real important thing. Let's take a look at this trapped pan. Remember I showed you the pan that had the trap in the bottom of it? Let's take a look at how it works. There's a little different action. When you work this pan down, you can work it a little bit faster because it does have that trap in the bottom. And as you work it back and forth, the way that Rodman demonstrates this pan is that he will run the material back and forth across it, and the gold will drop right down in that trap. And let's see if it works here. As we work this down, you can see we're doing the same thing. We're keeping a nice fluid action in the pan. And as we work this down and we run that down right to the concentrates. Now that black sand is heavy, and that's our concentrates. And if I was panning my concentrates, I'd probably stop right there. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but we've got gold right in the trap. If I can get it back here where we can pan out a little more of that black sand. Let's take a look at it this way. Can you see the gold in there? Okay, now again, you take your sucker bottle and you suck it up. Blueberry John is real slick at that, and he's going to show you a better picture of that than I could. I'm going to show you now my favorite pan, which is the Keen pan, manufactured by Keen Engineering. I'll give them a little plug here. I helped somewhat in design that pan. This is not the end of the line. There'll probably be better pans designed and come up. There's things after you build something that you can come up with better ideas and better ways to do it. Let's just take the material now. I'm going to take you completely through it and show you what we're talking about. You load your pan up with material with your shovel. You throw out some of the larger rocks. It doesn't hurt if you want to classify. And you take the material and you get a good semi-liquid condition. What this allows to do, it allows the gold to penetrate through the material and down to the bottom. And as it's going down to the bottom, you can begin to run some of that material off. But remember not to pour. Remember to kind of slough the material as you go. And you'll hear that term several times. Many of the expert panners will be telling you the same thing. But repetition is kind of a good thing too, because if you hear a certain thing long enough, then it sinks in. That's kind of the way it works with me. So let's just take this material and kind of run through it here. And I'll run this down, and as we're going down, I usually shift to one hand as I get down smaller. That's one of the reasons. Now, these are excellent pans. If you're built like Joe Louis or somebody, if you're really good and strong and you can handle a big heavy pan like that, these pans are really excellent. But the reason I like a smaller pan is because it takes some of the work out of it. There's nothing wrong with those larger pans. It all depends upon what you like. If you like a larger pan, use a larger pan. If you like a pan that doesn't have a trap in it, use that. There are some advantages to the metal pan. What are they? Well, you can cook your lunch in a metal pan. You can't do that in a plastic pan. There are some advantages to a plastic pan. You can use a little nitric acid in the plastic pan if you ever have an occasion to. We'll be telling you about that. Now we've got a couple of large rocks here. We'll pick them out. We'll continue to pan. A lot of people will stop when they got this much material in their pan. That's really too much. You've got a half a teacup full there. If you suspicion that you've got a lot of gold, certainly pan it. If you're just sampling out on the stream, you're going to want to pan it right on down so that you can see what you've got in your pan, because that's really too much for your fanning action. So you just continue to pan that right on down, and if you've got any gold in there, it'll show up. Now let's take a look. Here's where we start our fanning action. If you'll take that pan, now that you've got it panned down to where you've got a couple of teaspoons full of black sand and you don't see any gold in there, but if you'll take it and you'll tap it like this very gently on the side, the gold will concentrate in one spot, so that when you start your fanning action, and as you fan your pan around, your gold will be laid in one spot. And again, you need your sucker bottle to pull it out. Now there's some fellows coming up that I'm going to introduce you to that are real experts on this fanning action and how to get that fine gold out of there, and I'm going to let them tell you rather than me. But you can see that anybody can do it. It's a real simple thing. There's recreational gold panning, professional gold panning. There's guys that started out as recreational miners that are now working for the BEMA doing their sampling. Blueberry John, he'll tell you some about how he started out running a tour group and then became a professional gold panner. So there's all kinds of panning methods, but very few is taught in your universities and stuff. Most of the ways to get really good at panning is to just go out and do it over and over and over again. I can show you how to do it. You can run through this tape a time or two, but you're going to need to practice before you really get good at it, and that's the whole name of the game, is practice. Recreational gold mining, panning is probably the fastest growing hobby in America today. It's a lot of fun. You can go out to a stream, you can pan practically anywhere, you can come up with a few colors. A lot of people save the gold that they get from different streams, and they do it kind of as a hobby, as a quill. A lot of people that go backpacking in the mountains, that just go out on nature walks, take their gold pan with them because they can look through. There's a lot of things that you'll find in with the gold. We find garnets, we found diamonds up in Oregon and in Idaho. We found other semi-precious stones. And occasionally you'll even find a coin that's been left behind from the old timers. We've got some other instructions that tell you how to dig and where to find it in the cracks and bedrock and things like that. But I can tell you that gold panning is a rewarding hobby. I've got a couple other pans that I want to show you and tell you about. The copper pan, and where that's used is mainly the old timers used a copper pan when they used mercury, and they would take mercury and coat their pan with mercury, and the gold would stick to the mercury just like glue. Well, today, you know, we found a lot of things out about our ecology and our environment, and you do not want to use mercury open to the environment. So we don't do that anymore. If you have a need to use mercury, there are some very fine books that you can read up on it, and you'll want to use it in a completely enclosed area. Now, a guy says, well, if I pan into a tub, is that an enclosed area? It's not if you dump the tub. Mercury is something that you have to be very careful with when you use it, but it does work really slick in a metal pan, and I don't want to get too deep into that, but if you'd like some more information on it, you can write to the GPAA and they'll give you. Now, these other two pans that I have here, you can tell that they're notably smaller than the larger pan that I was using, and they're used for concentrates, dealing with concentrates. For instance, if I took, let me show you here, if I took this material and I dumped it right out of my pan into this smaller pan, now I've got a little bit better control. We'll catch that pan a little later as it goes down there, but now I've got a little bit better control. I can work a little finer action to come up, and this is what we call a concentrate pan. So I can concentrate that material down, and then I can catch it with my sucker bottle a little easy. So if you're having trouble with your larger pans, and then take your concentrates and put them in a small pan and go right around there, and you'll be able to work that out a little bit better. Now that, let's just take a look at what we've talked about. We've talked about the classifying pan, we've talked about the larger pans, the smaller pans, the square pans, all the different kinds of pans. They all work. They all work. It depends upon what you get used to. Remember to keep the material that you have underwater, keep a good semi-liquid condition, allow the gold to go to the bottom, do not pour it off, and pan it down to where you can see what's going on. I think you're going to get a lot of gold, but I'm going to introduce you now to some guys that are real experts in their field. They have a particular type and way of panning that you should see. It's not just what one guy does, because there's hundreds if not thousands of people out there that are expert panners. And these guys, I've known them for a long time, and they really know their stuff when it comes to panning. So let's take a look at what they do.
Hi, my name's Perry Massie, and I have a degree in mining engineering. And I'm going to go through the 6 basic steps of panning and go through in detail and show you how an engineer would pan for gold, so that it might help you in finding your gold. What I'm going to do is fill the pan up with material, use my classifier, and go through each step by step, and show you exactly how to do it. First of all, you find a good place in the stream to get your material. Get a good shovel full of material. Load it into your pan. The first step in panning is preparation. And what preparation is you take your pan and you find a nice calm area of the stream, and you place the pan in the water, preferably with the bottom of the pan sitting on the bottom of the stream, and the top of the pan, which is right here, real close to the top of where the water is. That's the perfect place to start your panning. Now, what I have here is what's called a classifier, and what that does is that removes most of the large rocks without losing any of the gold. The gold goes through the squares in here, and what I'm going to do in this first step of preparation is get all of the material through the classifier into the pan. And you do this with a side-to-side, back-and-forth motion. Get the water in the material, and the material will wash through into the pan. Okay, as you can see, we have a large amount of larger rocks in here. And I always look through here to make sure that there's no large nuggets. And a large nugget is going to be real bright, and usually you won't miss it very easily. You can take these and throw them away. Now we're into step 2 of your panning process. Step 1 was preparation. Okay, preparation, not only do you get rid of the large rocks, but you also break up any clay, any balls of clay that are in there, and make sure that your material is fluid in the pan. The next step is called stratification. Now what stratification does is it separates the material in your pan into different layers, starting with the heaviest at the bottom and the lightest at the top. And that's done with a good vigorous shaking action, keeping the pan in the water and level. So what I'm doing now is I'm stratifying the material in the gold pan. Okay, we should be stratified pretty well. Now the third step is called washing. And you want to alternate between steps 2 and step 3 until you work all of the light material out of your pan. So this is step 2 is stratification, and step 3 is washing. Now washing, you grasp the pan a little farther back and you tip it up at an angle, and you use a flat circular motion, and you wash the top layer of light material out of your pan, as you can see here. Now when you start to see heavy minerals showing up in the bottom of the pan, that's when you stop and re-stratify your material. That brings the heavies back to the bottom, and you alternate these 2 steps until you get down to where we go to the 4th step. So I'm going to wash this down using this action. Sometimes you can use a rocking motion or a flat circular motion like this. But when you start to see the material show up back here, that's when you re-stratify it and then tip it back up again. You can use one hand or you can use 2 hands. It all depends on the technique that you develop. Re-stratify and wash. Those are the 2 steps that you alternate until you get your material down to what we call the final, or the 4th step. Okay, now we're down to enough material where we do the 4th step, which is called cleaning. Now what cleaning is to get the final remaining light material out of your pan. And the way this is done is you bring your material back down level again, and you re-stratify it, and then you tip it up at an angle, and you do a dipping motion such as this, so that only the top layer of the light sand goes off. When you start seeing black sand, that's when you re-stratify your material, such as this. You can see by vigorously shaking, the light sand comes to the top, and then by using a dipping motion such as this, you can wash that light material right back off out of your pan. One point that I'd like to bring out is that when you get down to this much material and you have a lot of gold in it, you want to use what's called a safety pan. And I have a safety pan here so that we don't lose any of the gold. Sometimes you might flinch, or by accident you don't want to lose your gold that you have in your pan. So we're going to use the safety pan here, and we're going to catch the concentrates as they come through. Okay, so we're going to keep on doing step 4 until we get all of the heavy material to the bottom and all of the light sand off the top, the edges of the pan. That means that we've got a good sample, and it's always wise when you see gold like that while you're panning to use a safety pan. So you can see there's still some light material. We're going to take all that light material out of there. Now we get down to the 5th step. The 5th step is called inspection. That's where you pick your pan up and you see what material you have in your pan. We're down to where we have maybe a teaspoon or a tablespoon of material. We've gotten all of the light material out. Now we're ready for our inspection. Okay, now there's several different methods you can use for getting your concentrates to the point to where you can see the gold. Now the way I do it is I start off by using a back and forth, a side-to-side shaking motion, and then tapping the edge of the pan on the top side like this, and then swirling it like that, and you can see the gold showing up in the pan. Now this is the gold. This is the step that's called the inspection. Now you're looking, you can see, and it's a good way to estimate how much gold that you're getting. How much gold. Another thing to keep in mind is pan factor. And what pan factor is when you have a 16-inch pan, it generally runs about 200 pans to the yard. This here particular pan is a 14-inch pan, and it runs about 300 pans to the cubic yard. So if you had this much gold in each pan, then you'd know that you'd get 300 times that in a yard if you were sampling in an area. As these pebbles come up, you can throw these pebbles out, and we're getting down to where we're ready for our final step, which is gold removal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift my panning to the smooth edge of the pan so that the riffles are on the opposite side, and get the very final separation of the heavy sand from the gold. As you can see, you alternate between stratification and between washing, and you gently wash that black sand out of there. Now you got to make sure and watch what you're doing, and if you see a piece of gold starting to creep towards the edge, that's when you pull back and re-stratify it. And always pan into your safety pan when you get to this point. So we're almost down to where we're ready to pick the gold out. Okay, now we're ready for step 6. The final step is gold removal. And I need a little more water. What I try to do is I try to fan the material so that I have about a ½ inch distance from the black sand to the edge of the pan, or the trough of the pan. And by doing 2 or 3 steps this way, you can use your snuffer bottle to get all of the gold out of there. Okay, now I use what's called a tapping motion in order to get the gold from out of the black sand and up on the edge of the pan. So let me show you this tapping, the way that works. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is tap it so that the gold will actually jump away from the black sand, and it'll be right up along the trough, and you can pick it out with your snuffer, just like this. And blow some of that material away like that. Get it all into one little hump, and your snuffer will suck the gold right out of it. Just like that. Okay, so now what we do is we have our gold in our bottle, and we can set this back down aside and redo this several times until you get all of the gold out of there. So I'm going to fan it again, and then I give it a light tap. That brings a bunch of more gold back to the edge, and then use your snuffer and you can suck the gold right out of it. And you can get a real clean sample by using this method. And what you do with this is you dump the water out of it and you dump it back into a pan, and you can allow it to dry, and then you can put it on your gold scales and weigh it up and get your sample analysis. But that's basically the step-by-step process. We'll review it one more time. The first step is preparation, where you remove the large rocks. The second step is stratification, where you stratify the material with a good vigorous shaking action and bring the gold to the bottom of the pan. The third step is washing, where you wash the light material off the top. The fourth step is cleaning. When you get down to where you have just a small amount of gold in the bottom, you get the final amount of light material out of your pan. And then the fifth step is inspection, where you pick it up and you look to see what material you have in there. And then the last step is the gold removal, which is the sixth step, and that's the final amount. And I wish you luck, and thanks a lot.
Well, you just saw Perry Massie, our mining engineer, give a demonstration of the technical aspects, the 6 steps of gold mining, if you will. Now the guy that I'm going to introduce to you is Blueberry John. Blueberry John is well known around Nome, Alaska, and a lot of other areas for his expert skills in panning. Blueberry is particularly adept at panning the heavy garnet and black sands on the 20-mile beach at Nome. This is a very popular area with a lot of weekend prospectors, and it certainly is an area that separates the men from the boys when it comes to panning. So let's take a look at old Blueberry John. There's a lot of stories that we could tell you about Blueberry. He is a real colorful character, but let me introduce you to Blueberry, and he'll show you his famous Blueberry bounce.
Yeah, I'm John Andrews, better known as Blueberry John, and I've lived in Nome since 1967 when I first came up here. And I've had the hobby of panning for gold since the first month that I came here. And I learned the basics from an old timer who'd been mining all over Alaska for 50 years. He was good, but he was slow. But I learned basics from him, and then I've been improving on it ever since, and now I don't know anyone that can do beach panning any better than I can. In fact, I'm still learning after 22 years, and I wish there was somebody who could teach me, but I don't know anybody that can teach me. However, I've learned the basics. When I start panning, testing on the beach, for instance, I've learned to start with that the first thing is you don't put too much material in your pan. When I'm panning concentrates, a handful is plenty. And when you're panning straight material from the beach to test it, a third of a pan is too much. So what I have here now is concentrates that I've already taken out quite a bit of the gold and use it to show you. Let's pretend like we've got material directly off of the beach area where we suspect there's pretty good gold. What you look for is black sand, red sand, and the darker red it is, the better chance that there's going to be some good gold in it. If you were to find a layer even foot and a half down, half an inch or less thick of black sand, pure black sand, and I've found such places, go for it, because the chances are it's the richest in gold. Anyway, to start with, you put your material in and keep it below the water, underwater. And you hold your pan flat and you make sure that you get everything in your pan moving. Everything. Why? That's to make sure that your gold, which is 3 to 4 or 5 times as heavy as the heaviest sand in here, the gold is going to the bottom. And the light material is working its way to the top. And then you gradually, and I mean gradually, tip it forward. And then you begin sloughing off the lighter material. You do not pour. If you pour, the gold is the first thing to go out. So what you're doing is sloughing the lighter material off the top. Now already you've noticed something. The motion of the pan is one direction. I happen to be going counterclockwise. And the water is coming in here and going out there. And I happen to like this pan. It's a new one that's call it by the Keen Company, and I prefer this now to all the others. I have used others before that are good, but it's mainly because of these riffles here. I like these riffles, and also the color, and also the fact it's got a big bottom. Anyway, so you get rid of material like this, in like this, out like this, and then you stop, shake it back, start clear back flat. Now I happen to know from all my practice that my gold is concentrating right here, right there, and that's the way I want it. And the secret of panning is knowing where the gold should be in your pan. Now, there's not a whole lot of difference between concentrate panning and test panning, except for the amount of gold. And in this case, it's like concentrate panning. And now I'm getting rid of a little bit more sand, and because it's concentrates, I may be losing a few specks. However, now you see I've worked it back, and you can see here that most of the gold is right there. Now, let me get rid of quite a bit of this material before I go ahead with some more demonstration here. And you notice I'm doing it pretty fast, and I know I'm losing a little bit of gold over the front, but not all that much. If you were doing a test, you would be very careful because you don't want to lose a speck, single speck out of it. All right. I'm moving the material back away, and most of the gold is kept forward by the motion that I just used. Let me do that again, and just so you can get the idea of the whole process. See the shaking and the movement of the water? And by the way, you don't leave that gold uncovered very long, because if you do, it's going to float on the surface of the water. It's that fine, most of it. Now, here's a trick I learned 8 years after I started panning as a hobby. Nobody taught me this. I learned it myself, and that is the bounce. People call it the blueberry bounce. And watch very carefully. I've got so much water. You notice the material is here, and we more or less watch a certain speck of gold here, and I want to get this speck of gold right up against this edge right there. So watch carefully. 4 bounces, and it's there. Then I work the material back, bounce it a little bit more, put my finger in and get most of the gold all in one spot, and bounce it a little bit more like that, and there it is. See? Now then I take the sniffer, fill it full of water, squeeze it, and hold the squeeze with the gold underwater, sniff, and then most of it's in here already. See? Let's do that again, just for fun. There's still some gold in here. Well, let's get it all forward to start with. Notice the motion. I'm not losing any material. It's a circular motion in one direction only. And take a good look. You can see most of the gold is already right there. See? So then I spread it out like this, then do the bounce. Do the bounce. There it is. Notice the movement of the water here as it takes the black sand away from the gold, like this. And then bounce it a little bit more. Most of the gold, not all, but most of it. Let's watch this speck while I bounce it forward. See it get clear to the edge? All right. All right, let's sniff up nearly all of that gold here. Squeeze the bottle underwater. There it is. There.
What's the best season you ever had on the beach, Blueberry?
Well, I retired from being tour manager here with a drill ship. And we worked in the laboratory, and I'd work 12 hours on a shift, 7 days a week. Yes?
Just panning.
Just panning. And I enjoyed it very much and got good pay for it, too.
Then how do they catalog their samples? Do they
They
measure
have
each piece?
let's say, well, on the drill ship, the drill would be so big, 5 inch, 6 inch, I don't know what it was, and they would drill 1 meter and put all the material that came out of that 1 meter into a 5-gallon bucket, and then each test that we do would be that total, whatever was in that 5-gallon bucket, no matter what kind of material, clay, bog, gravel, sand, mud, whatever. And there might be only, in a 5-gallon bucket, there might only be 4 specks of gold. They wanted to make sure you got every speck. And so they didn't care how long it took us to do that 1 meter of, and sometimes it would take hours and hours to do 1 meter of a drill test, and maybe only 3 or 4 specks of gold.
You really like to pan, don't you?
Oh, I enjoy panning. It's, in fact, I've never lost any of my fascination for it. I'm always curious of what's coming out of the next pan, you know. And even when I was working at it professionally for the summer of '87 and '88, and the winter of '88 too, by the way, they did testing through the ice out on the Bering Sea. And they would bring the material to the lab through the ice in the winter.
How did you come with the name Blueberry John?
Well, that's connected with gold mining too, in a way. We were taking tours 15 miles out to a gold mine. And in late August, when the blueberries are ripe, it would be nice to stop on the way back from the mine, back to Nome, stop and pick blueberries, right? Well, this one particular day, we had 100 people on tour, 3 bus loads. We took them all out to the gold mine at the same time, all 3 buses, 100 people. And, well, on the way back, I stopped. I wanted to stop to pick blueberries. Well, I happened to know those other 2 bus drivers didn't particularly care to stop to pick blueberries. Well, on the way back that day, I was the first bus. So when I stopped, I made sure I parked the bus right in the middle of the gravel road. So, and here comes the second bus, the third bus. They had no choice. Here's 100 people out picking blueberries. And the third driver had to stop kind of short. And he said, "That blueberry picking son of a..." Well, the editor of our newspaper here in Nome, the Nome Nugget, heard about that. And so he wrote a story about my tour and called me Blueberry John, and it stuck. Then later I became tour manager, and now all the tour guides have to stop to pick blueberries in August.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Blueberry.
You bet.
It's been a pleasure.
Right. And I hope you learned a little bit about panning.
Well, there you just saw Blueberry John and the famous blueberry bounce. Now I have another fella, a prospector of note, to introduce you to. He has a particular technique that is not seen every day. He works in a particular area. These are some of the guys that spend an awful lot of time a long way from town. But we were lucky to get a hold of Jake Hartwick, quite a prospector in his own right, a young fella that's going to show you some real intricate steps in panning.
Hi, I'm Jake Hartwick, and I've been prospecting for quite a few years now. And I know it's one thing that every panner should take to heart, and that's to watch other people, because you can always pick up little hints here and there and little techniques from all the different people, and then form your own panning technique. And that's what I've done through my years and watching real good panners out there, and they all seemed to have a little particular technique that helped form my own technique. And I'm going to show you a little bit of mine. I'm going to run through a pan here. I'm going to do a little shoveling on this gravel bar right here, and I'm going to go ahead and put a pan in there. And I'm going to tell you about a particular situation that you might run across in various streams. Now, I usually prospect and do my prospecting out in remote areas, so I usually don't take a classifier screen with me. You know, it's kind of a little bit too much to lug around. So I do my classifying with my hand and pick out the big rocks, and I'm going to show you a little bit here. Like they said before, you want to keep your material in a good liquid suspension here. Stratify your material down in your pan. And then you can start tilting your pan a little bit and starting to wash a little bit of the light material off. And I'm going to pick some of the larger rocks out. I can take some of this top material off. And I usually like to use one hand when I start getting down to a manageable amount. And set it in the water, and it's not too heavy. And I'm not moving the material right now. All I'm doing is going back and forth and washing the light stuff off the top. I noticed one thing up on Blind Creek when I was working up in Alaska. About 3/4 of your concentrates out of your dredge was all ruby sand, garnet sand they call it. And one thing about that, you could sit and swirl around just like this, and you could watch the flakes ride right up on top, and they keep on doing that. And I noticed one particular technique that seemed to get that stuff to sink through that heavy red sand was an action like this. Back and forth. Not in a swirling motion, but a good, vigorous back and forth action. And it would settle that material, those gold flakes, those thin, flat flakes, real down there real good. Just back and forth like this, and it seemed to work real well. And you could use that in any situation where you have a lot of black sand, a lot of heavy sand at all. Red sand, garnet sand. Notice like this. You're not moving the material, you can see that light stuff just wash right out of the pan right there. Re-stratify your material. Wash the light stuff off. Back again. As soon as you see your black sand start appearing, go ahead and shake her down. Now you want to get to a point where the riffles become actually a hindrance to you. So you get it over to the side, and you can do the same thing. Now always be careful, when you see your black sand, you can start to see some of the gold start appearing. You want to re-stratify it. You still want to be real careful. But when you're test panning, you might lose a speck here and there, but that's not that important. You basically want to see the overall quantity of gold that's in the material there, whether it's worth setting up your high bank or your sluice or your dredge or whatever. Re-stratify, wash your light stuff off. You get a little rock in there, go ahead and peel that out of there. Now I'm getting down to a certain point here. What I want to do is do the inspection. When you swirl around like that, you can swirl and you can see the gold starting to appear in the pan. You tap it a little bit, you can see all that gold. I can make that gold walk right up the pan, just like that. But that helps get the gold right away from that black sand. You can see how it's all settled right there. Just give it a little tap, and that gold will get right up to the edge of the pan. Wash a little bit more of that black sand away. And as you're doing that, get a little tap. But you gently wash it, and you can see that black sand separating right away from that gold. You can bounce it right back up to the edge. Then I can take my little sucker bottle here, get some water in it. You can see the technique right here. Tilt your pan down, get your gold. One little lump there. Suck it up in the bottom. Keep going along until you get basically all the little pieces out of your pan. And that's basically my techniques. And good luck to you out there in your panning. And may your bottom of your pan be yellow like this one.
It's great, isn't it? Out here on the stream, getting a little gold. Well, you just saw Jake's special techniques, and I have a young guy that has been prospecting and mining all his life. He's been around a lot of the trade shows that our club has put on. He's done a lot of commercial mining. Practical miner, you probably couldn't find a better one. He's going to talk to you about speed panning, competition panning, and some of those things, which are certainly real popular today. His name is Tom Massie, and let's take a look at his techniques.
Hi, I'm Tom Massie. I've been panning since I was about 7 years old. I'm going to show you a little bit today about speed panning. This really doesn't have anything to do with your test panning or your panning out on the stream or when you're really panning for gold. This is a competition that's been set up. They started back in about the 20s just to test other panners against other panners. We kind of have a thing that gold miners have, and cowboys used to say, you don't call a guy a cowboy until you've seen him ride. Call a guy a prospector until you've seen him pan. So this is just regular flow sand. They use this a lot in the competitions, and these competitions are held at gold shows and at trade shows around. Up in the Mother Lode country, they have a panning championship up there every year. I won my first panning championship when I was 11 years old, and a lot of people that were in that competition, it was a freestyle competition, had 12, 13 years, lots of experience on me. I was just a young kid, but I'd been panning every day. I'd been out mining and concentrates and working concentrates day in, day out. So I had a lot of experience before I went into pan, and I just got a lucky pan, and I did real well and happened to win that first competition I was in. And I've been competing ever since. Just last year I won the freestyle championship at a couple of the trade shows, gold shows that the Gold Prospectors puts on. What I'm going to do here today for you is I'm going to use BBs, and usually in competition we use real nuggets, but these BBs are a lot lighter than real gold. They're about twice as light as gold is because they're just made out of lead. Just to give myself a little handicap. Usually take these BBs and they place them, separate them in the pan, and then you push them down just about an inch, about the top of the finger. Now some judges, when they put them in, they got real big fingers and they go down a little deeper, and some judges that are smaller, they got little fingers and they go down a little less deeper. They poke those down in there so you don't know, where they're at in there. And the time usually starts when you touch the pan. Now you notice this is just regular flow sand. This is what they use in competition. Now what I'm going to do is, the main thing when you do get into competition is that you got to make sure and get those BBs on the bottom before you get the sand off. And time usually starts when you touch the pan, and they have a timer on you, and you race against the clock and you race against other people. So in competition they'd say, go! Now I'm working it on down, making sure the BBs are on the bottom. And then you work that pan on down. You get to this point, and you peel back, look for your BBs, all 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that was 20, 30 seconds. Usually in competition, you get a pan that well, you come up with all the gold. Right around 9 seconds, you can pretty much count on being in the money. Some of these competitions you can do pretty well. Some of them don't pay. Some of them are just the prestige of competing. A few other things I want to show you while I got the chance here, while they gave me the chance to show you, is about these traps. I know I saw probably a lot of the other guys on the film showing you about these traps. But that's the reason that I use this particular pan in competitions, because of these traps. These BBs come down here and get trapped in these traps, and you notice just how that pans. Well, there's one that fell out. See how they just hang right in there? When you got material in there, those BBs hang right in those traps and don't want to come out. I'm going to show you a few other things that'll help you with your panning, a few tricks of the trade. A lot of panning has to do with the wrist action. So when you use your wrist, it's very important that you get the correct action. A lot of people, when you first start out, you use 2 pans. But for me, for instance, as I've grown and gotten more into panning, when I get down to finishing panning, I use 1 hand because I use a lot of wrist action. Let me gather up some more sand here. And this is just regular flow sand, so this would be different material than you'd be using out on the creek bed. I want to show you, I'm going to throw some large rocks in here, okay? This is a particular method I use, and I want you to pay particular attention to my wrist, okay? When I roll the pan back and forth like this, okay, that's called the fanning action of it. Now notice these rocks, okay? When I roll it back and forth, watch these large rocks just roll right out of the pan. See how they just come out? Now your gold, you work your gold down so it sticks in the bottom of this trap down in the bottom, and then you could work those large rocks right off by that rolling action. Now that has all to do with your wrist. It takes a while to practice that method of rolling it back and forth like that with your wrist, but after a while you'll learn that and pick it up. I hope you learned something here today, and I hope my speed panning showed you a little bit of what speed panning's all about and what competition panning's all about. It's completely different than your regular panning that you have out in the stream. When you're out there panning, you wouldn't want to use this method at all because you'd probably, lose your gold. But in this particular, style, you're working against the clock and you're in competition. After a guy learns how to pan a while, certain speed panning techniques, they develop their own. I've appreciated you guys listening to me here today, and I hope you picked up something and learned something, and thank you very much.
Well, there, ladies and gentlemen, you've seen some of probably the best gold panners that I've seen in my lifetime. I've been mining for 25 years. I've seen a lot of panners as the president of the Gold Prospectors Association of America with over 65,000 members. I've seen the difficulties that some people have had with their panning. If you'll go back and review this tape and look at Perry's 6 methods or 6 steps, look at Blueberry John's bounce, you will be able to go out on your weekend and find gold practically every weekend that you go out. If you stay in an area that's known for gold or in a stream that's known for gold, you can have a great time. It is a tremendous hobby, but it takes some skill, and I believe that this tape will prepare you for that skill. I thank you and enjoy. There's nothing in the world like gold panning.
Join the GPAA today. Everything we do here at the GPA has one objective, to help you find more gold. Join the Gold Prospectors Association today for a one-year membership for only $25 and start receiving all your great benefits. Visa or MasterCard accepted. Write GPAA, P.O. Box 507, Bonsall, California, 92003. Or call area code 619-728-6620.